the
bro.
the audio issues, but
No
everything
worries,
should
my
be
man.
good now.
No,
This is
no
actually my
worries.
first time interviewing you, man. I've always interviewed Paco, and now you've taken over that position. And we wanted to get you on, obviously, and just touch bases with you, man. So
Sure, man. It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
thank you for coming on and being accessible. I love that you're also active on Twitter. Can we start with your age? How old are you?
I'm a I'm a young guy with age. I'm 41, man.
Okay, okay. No, and I guess that's why you are active on social media, and I
Yes.
love that you respond to things. You don't let people assume. You're actively out there. Dare I say, defending the WBO in certain situations. What made you want to take that role of being so active on the social media versus waiting for your you know conventions like most sanctioning bodies?
Well, I think that there's a lot of speculation and misleading information on social media, particularly as to how the sanctioning bodies operate, the way they render their rulings, what happens behind the scenes. So my approach is striving to do the opposite, have full transparency as to the way we operate, the way we make our decisions, educate the fans, inform the fans, because as you know, people scroll on social media in a matter of seconds. Not many people take the time to read carefully, and I think it is important to clarify the points or any inquiries that the fans may have. Not only the fans, the boxing media as yourself, the fighters, managers, promoters, and all the other stakeholders related to the industry. I think it is important, regardless if you agree or disagree with our decisions. Rest assured that I will, on behalf of the WBO, try to clarify and set all the cards on the table so you guys can have an informative decision on as to how we operate. I think that's the way that's the way I see things.
If no one's gonna jump in, I'll say the first thing I was excited about and like, okay, I can back this president was the Earl
Mhm.
Spence ruling. He never fought for a WBO outside of the unification with Crawford. He never campaigned at 54. So I
Mhm.
felt like it was unfair that he was going to get a unification shot. What was ultimately the committee's ruling and reasoning behind not approving Spence?
Well, what I did was I recommended to the committee on not approving TGB Promotions' request to install Errol in the 150 in the 154 division to fight for the unified championship immediately coming off a almost 2 year layoff, suffering a defeat by TKO by Crawford, had never fought at 154, was not rated. So my rationale was that if I would allow that from happening, it would set a bad precedent, and I would be opening the doors for future petitions on behalf of other fighters. So I think it was the correct call. I think we got a lot of positive feedback in that regard. And either we enforce the rules consistently and accordingly, or we don't have no rules. And it's madness, anarchy. I think it was the right call. Regardless of Errol Spence, with which I consider him one of the best welterweights of his era, unified champion. His only defeat was against boxing's pound for pound king and Terrence Crawford. But there has to be some sensibility and common sense in the rulings as to the sanctioning bodies. Either we do things correctly, or we're gonna become either obsolete or have no credibility.
Go ahead, Johnny.
I'll jump in there. Gustavo, nice to meet you.
How are you,
I had
Johnny?
good, good, good. So we live in a day and age now that where champions most of the time aren't really interested in fighting mandatories, right?
Mhm.
They're more interested in going for bigger money fights. However, as a sanctioning body, it's your job to make sure that the champions are fighting who they need to fight. So
Sure.
what type of frustration do you, how frustrating is it to deal with the fighter that doesn't want to fight a mandatory that you sanction? Meanwhile, he wants to fight somebody else. Like how frustrating is that? And how do you intend on tackling that in the future? Because you're going to face that.
That is a
And
great question.
Gustavo, can
Yeah,
I
go ahead.
just add? Can can the punishment be they get dropped from the rankings? Because it seems like these guys are at the number one position waiting for a certain champion. I can give you a few situations, specifically WBO with Virgil Ortiz and Terrence Crawford. They just decided
Sure.
not to take that opportunity that was given to them. I feel like they should be dropped out the top 10. If you don't want a title shot, which is the
Great.
WBO's greatest gift to you, maybe you should start at the back of the line. But great question, Johnny. Sorry to interrupt.
Great question, Johnny. I agree as well. So that question has multiple answers. The first response to your questions would be there's a limit of what a sanctioning body can do to force a fighter in facing another fighter. We can force a mandatory, but we cannot oblige a fighter to enter the ring and fight a particular opponent. Like, for example, a champion has to do a mandatory within an X amount of days as set forth per our rules. Ordinarily, 9 months, with the exception of the heavyweight divisions, or 6 months, depending on the condition provided by the committee when we sanction a fight. For example, we had that scenario with Janovic, the middleweight. He has had problems on finding a suitable mandatory. We gave a chance to Hamza Sheraz. He was number one rated at 160. We ordered the fight negotiations, and Sheraz rejected the opportunity. So what did the committee did? I recommended to the committee. He complied with the rules. He was designated mandatory. You don't want to fight, you're out. And we excluded him from the ratings. So we took affirmative action. And I think, and I agree with you guys, if a mandatory challenger has been designated, has been granted the opportunity to fight the champion, and he rejects the opportunity, we can do two things. Either demote him on the ratings or exclude him from the ratings. So those are the responses that I can give at this time. It's very frustrating on behalf of the sanctioning body as to give an opportunity and a fighter rejects the opportunity. We had another scenario recently with Teofimo's mandatory. We had Arnold Barbosa rated at number 1 and Catterall rated at number 2. So we also have to consider that the sport is intimately related to the business aspect. So at the same time, we have to take into consideration that we don't want to force an unworthy mandatory to the champion, because Teo is the man at 140, right? So what we did with Catterall and Barbosa, we said, well, these two guys may have convincing arguments to be designated for the mandatory, right? One is number 2. Barbosa is number 1. The other is number 2. You may have arguments on both sides of the fence as to who should be deserving of the mandatory. So what we did was I recommended to the committee, I think this fight should be sanctioned as a final eliminator for the mandatory. And we would provide each fighter a ultimate opportunity to showcase their skills, get bigger exposure, and then have a more convincing argument as to forcing Teofimo to fight the winner, which is Barbosa, instead of just ordering a mandatory just for the sake of it. If we would do that, we would not only do a disservice to the champion, also to the promoter, to the network, because we have to consider all those particular circumstances: the champion, the network, the promoter, the challenger, and try to find a reasonable outcome for all the stakeholders. That's my opinion.
Hello, Gustavo.
Go ahead, Tone. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Tone. I'm sorry.
Two-Tone the Superstar here. I'm on boxing scene. How you doing, brother? I'm on boxing scene. I'm looking at 175 pounds at the WBO. I do not see David the Mexican Monster Benavidez in the rankings. I wanted to know why is that, because I want to be educated on that.
Sure.
And it looks like in all the other sanctioning bodies, David's the regular champion for WBA, interim champion for WBC, but he's nothing in the WBO. Would that make him the mandatory for Bivol, or just or educate me on
Okay, let's go boxing 101. When
Okay.
a fighter wins a title from one of the 4 recognized sanctioning bodies, that'll be the BA, the BC, or the IBF. They cannot be, we don't rate them in our ratings because they are already champions. So, per my rules, as well as my fellow colleagues, IBF, WB, and WBC, I cannot force a champion I cannot force my champion to face the champion from another recognized sanctioning body because I don't have jurisdiction, which is a legal term, which means I don't have the authority per my rules to force my champion to face another champion. When you see unifications, those unifications take place because the parties voluntarily agree per a bout agreement, a contractual agreement per their respective promoters, or what is called a POS, a provision of services agreement, whereby a promoter provides the services of his fighter to another promotional entity. Benavidez is the interim champion of the WBC, so he's not available within our ratings to be installed. On the flip side, if Benavidez would like to fight Callum Smith, which is my interim champion, I would have no objection in that regard. But the parties, in other words, the fighters through their promoters, would need to agree voluntarily to make that fight. I cannot force them legally. I don't have that power. Neither does the BA, nor the BC, nor the IBF. When you see unifications, those are agreements voluntarily between the parties.
Okay, nice.
Gustavo, it sounds like we're headed down a world or a galaxy where interim titles are going to be unified and undisputed. Currently, Benavidez sits as a current unified interim title list. He has a interim WBC, a regular WBA. Now you're saying you're willing to do the Callum Smith fight, which means he'll have to pay you sanctioning fees and receive the belt, ultimately making him a 3-belt unified interim champion. How is that like?
But let me explain. That's a good question, but there's a distinction. I believe that Benavidez, he won a legitimate interim championship that the WBC sanctioned. We did an interim in light heavyweight due to being injured. I think he suffered a jaw injury or a dental condition that he was impaired, and the rematch was rescheduled originally. So we had justified reasons to do an interim championship to allow the division to keep active and give opportunities to the other contenders. And we sanctioned Boazzi against Hutchinson for the interim championships. What you saw on last Saturday, that you had an interim championship in the light heavy and also the full champion, the light heavy, as the main event, that was pure coincidence that you saw 2 champions in the same category fighting on the same show, which I object totally. But that was pure coincidence that they fought on the same card the same night. The BC, they have their legitimate interim light heavyweight champion. I believe Morel was the WBA regular light heavyweight championship. So we don't do unifications between regular champions or franchise or silver or diamond. No. We only allow unifications between legitimate champions, which means the full champion, or if an interim champion wants to fight another interim champion that is legitimately recognized, I cannot prevent it. You get me? But
Absolutely.
subject to very specific conditions. For example, when we have an interim championship, we always set forth some conditions to terminate that interim status the fastest way possible. However, you also have to consider, for example, now Bivol won the light heavyweight, right? Undisputed. And they're going to do the trilogy, most likely. What would the fans, the general public, the industry would like to see? Better VF Bivol the trilogy, or they would like to see Bivol fighting a mandatory?
I think we want Benavidez Bivol, but yes, we would not want to see Bivol have to fight Michael Everett.
Well, that's another scenario, right? Of a sanctioning body's ruling as to their mandatory designation system, which I respect, and I'm not here to criticize a brother colleague. Everyone has their own rules and and the way they operate. I can speak on behalf of the WPO, but I'm sure, guys, 9 out of 10 people would say I would prefer the trilogy because it serves the best interests of boxing as a whole. After those two unbelievable matches between Beterbiev and Bivol.
Gustavo, I got another question.
Sure.
What do you say to the fans that say there's way too many belts in boxing? Like, for example, why is there an interim belt? Why is there a silver belt? Why is this, you mentioned another belt. Why is that? Why is it not just one championship belt?
John, I agree 100%. There are too many belts. I personally think I'm going to try to reduce at least. We have a title called a regional belt called the WBO Global. That doesn't even make sense, right? Because the world is a globe and the globe is a world, and it's very confusing. That title was approved by the committee, I think in 2017, and democracy wins. It was a majority vote of the members approving that name, which I had objections from the outset, but I was the legal counsel for the BO. I try to make my moves to change the name. Under my presidency, I'm going to try either to change the name because it doesn't make sense, or reduce at least one of the regional titles, because I couldn't agree with you more. There are too many titles, they're confusing, and it doesn't help the industry. Now, on the flip side, theoretically, having just one belt is the ideal scenario, like the NBA, one championship, like the NFL, the Super Bowl, like the major leagues or the World Series. But you should also consider supply and demand. These fighters like Crawford, Canelo, Usyk, Fury, Joshua, in a way, the big players, they may be fighting twice a year max, right? And if you have only one champion, one title, what about the other? We're talking about 17 weight classes. At least we rank 15 fighters per weight class on the male side, which means 255 fighters, right? So you got multiple fighters per weight class trying to get an opportunity, and you have only one champion fighting maybe twice a year. What about the opportunities to the other fighters? I think the question is, there has to be a limit as to the amount of titles, right? I'm against the regular titles, the other titles, the doing entrance just for the sake of it, right? I couldn't agree with you more. And there are some titles that simply don't make sense. But there are also some minor titles that most of the fighters do not reach that level of elite, right? So maybe those second tier fighters that accomplish winning a regional title, that may be their highest accomplishment to their careers. Winning a international title, a Latino title, a North American title. Most of them. Not everyone gets to the world championship level. Maybe one fighter wins a world title and maybe makes one defense, two. If you see 3, 4, 5 title defenses, that is the exception of the norm. So I agree that there are too many belts. I also agree that we should reduce the amount of belts, but at the same time, I have my reservations as to whether one belt could suffice, considering supply and demand.
I needed to hear that. See, that I needed to hear.
Let me get to the people's question, and Gustavo, whenever you know your time is up, let us know.
First, my man, I got all the. I set the knife for you, my man.
Oh man, appreciate it. I got Starks from London. This is not a question, just all love. He says, I always appreciated the WBO when I was younger. Some of my favorite fighters held that belt: Nazim Hamed, Calzaghe, Thompson, Ben, and Eubank. So again, no question, all love. Next one is from Ese Moro in Pennsylvania. Says, as the president of the WBO, what's one of the biggest challenges you faced and one thing you enjoy as president? Thanks for coming on the show.
One of the most challenging things that I've you know have to deal with is saying no to the friends. In this business, you make a lot of friends, and saying no to your friends has been one of the most difficult challenges, because I can have an extraordinary relationship with promoter X, and then he calls, hey, my friend, how you doing? What's up? Hey, I need this favor. Can you help me with this? And I have to say, you're my friend, my man. I love you, but I got to follow the rules. That's been one of the most challenging things to date, saying no to my friends. And one of the most passionate or joyful things that I like about my business, the charity stuff, helping, doing the gyms for the kids, providing equipment, helping amateur boxers. We're currently doing a partnership with Jake Paul that we're renovating gyms in Puerto Rico and also in the States. That's one of the most, I think that's one of the most happy, joyful things that I do as a president.
I have Rue in the 504 New Orleans. He says, objectively, what improvements could the WBO make as a sanctioning body?
Well, we have to do more for the fighters. We can't simply do a regional title, then put the fighter in the ratings, then the fighter makes 2 or 3 consecutive defenses of the regional title, fights a rated opponent, gets designated the mandatory, wins the belt, we give him the belt. Maybe we'll help him with a gym, or he does 5 consecutive defenses and we give him a special ring. That's cool. But we need to do more for the fighters directly. There's legitimate concerns as to, what do the sanctioning bodies do with the sanctioning fees? And I agree as to questioning, what do we do with the fees? Well, and I can say, well, we cover some operational expenses. We use the monies for nonprofit purposes, charity, help out gyms, some boxers with financial burden or medical conditions. But we need to incentivize boxers. And how can we do that? For example, I'm trying to develop some pilot programs starting in Puerto Rico and extending it to the United States and thereafter internationally. Like, for example, we have a fighter that he wins the WBO championship, right? And let's say he makes 5 consecutive title defenses and he has paid in sanctioning fees, let's say $40K, right? So we tell the champion, hey champ, have you bought a first property? No, I have not. Okay. Those $40K that you have paid, we're going to give it back to you, but we're going to pay you for the closing fees of your first property. Or we're going to give you those 40K for the deposit of your first property. That could be an alternative. A second alternative could be using those 40K for an investment fund or an investment account, a 401K, IRA account. Hey, champ, we're going to put this money here for a couple of years. They generate interest, and thereafter you decide how to disperse or withdraw the money. Another way could be giving those monies to a charity foundation that the champion wants. Autism, cancer, I don't know. That could be. These are concepts that we're brainstorming, right? Another thing that I'm planning to do is a financial literacy program for the fighters. What is a savings account? What is a checkings account? What is a boxers are they render professional services. They have to pay their Social Security. What is a 1040 form? For tax purposes. What is an investment account? At least in basic terms, so we can provide the fighters at least some guidance as to how they should use their monies properly. So we could be here all night trying to brainstorm different initiatives that the WBO can do. But that is the course that I'm heading towards to incentivize the fighters directly, whereby the fighters would say, wow, the WBO is offering me those opportunities. If I become a world champion, I'm going to go with the WBO.
No, I love that. Whenever
Yeah.
you bring that concept to fruition and you're actually giving the 40K back for the down payments and the closing costs, let me know so we can help publicize that. That is a phenomenal
Another thing,
idea.
another thing I forgot to mention, other second tier fighters, second tier level fighters that don't reach that pinnacle of becoming big household names. There are many of them that don't have promotional outlets, right? So they don't have the proper resources to get themselves exposed to these like re-up season shows, right? So also the WBO will, for the first time in our convention, we're going to provide these second tier level fighters and also the big level fighters if they want to, as well as these second level promoters, how to use the social media platforms properly to their advantage to raise their profile and marketability, because fighters are their own brand. So we're going to provide them through the WBO those opportunities as well.
Gustavo, I want to ask if I have plenty of questions from the people, but I need to know the origin story, right? Like, how long have you been with the WBO? What position did you start at? I know that you were an attorney, but what position did you start at? And did you know Ed Levine? Because I interviewed him. He's the president of the IBO, and he
Yeah.
claims that he helped start the WBO. I maybe messing up the story, but he claims he was with the WBO first, and then he started the IBO.
I know Mr. Levine. He's a gentleman. I saw him recently in Riyadh, and I have a very good relationship with him and the personnel from the IBO. Nothing to the opposite. He's a true gentleman and a very classy guy. And if he's watching this program, my regards to Mr. Levine. Yes, he was
So you
part of the
worked together though? Did you work together?
No. What he told you that he was part of the WBO when it started, that is true. He used to be a judge with the WBO. I believe he also served as the supervisor, and he occupied a position within the executive committee when the WBO was originally formed, if I recall correctly. I started in the WBO almost 10 years ago. I started as an intern. I was already a licensed attorney, practitioner, trial lawyer. I was finishing graduate studies at Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. And my academic advisor at the time, I had to do an internship with a sports entity or a law firm related with sports, and there were no positions or entities related with boxing at the time. They had Major League Baseball, Major League Soccer, the NFL, and the internship positions on those sports institutions were more related with ticket selling, social outreach, etc. There were no legal positions. And I wanted to do something related with law because I was already a licensed attorney, practitioner, and I wanted to combine the theoretical things from school with the practical side as an attorney. So I proposed to my academic advisor whether boxing could be an opportunity. He said, "Well, yeah, prepare a proposal. We will review it and we will let you know." And I started calling lots of people, man. I called Top Rank. I called Golden Boy, TGB Promotions. I believe I also called DeBella Entertainment. I called the Puerto Rican Boxing Commission. I think the only promotional outlet that answered me was Top Rank, and they said, "Hey, kid, there are no internships here. Don't call here. See you later." And the Puerto Rican Boxing Commission, I think they requested my CV, my curriculum vitae. I submitted it, no response, and then I saw the WBO on a website, on a boxing page. I think it was Boxing Scene or something, and the BO is based in Puerto Rico, and its main offices are in Puerto Rico. I'm a Puerto Rican guy. I'm born and raised in Puerto Rico. So I said, this could be an opportunity. So I called. They asked me for my information. I follow up, and I think I was sending emails and calling for like 3 months. Hey, I'm a licensed attorney, but I'm also a graduate student. I want to do an internship. I'm interested. And they gave me an interview. I think it was, they called me like on a Monday to tell me, hey, can you come on a Tuesday? And I said, yeah. So I suit up. I travel like almost 3 hours from my hometown. I was in Puerto Rico at that time, and I had an interview with Paco. And the interview was very informal. He asked me maybe 3 or 4 questions unrelated with boxing, and he didn't give me a response. He asked me how much money I needed. I said, no, this is an internship. I cannot accept any monies because I'm prohibited from doing so. I just want an opportunity. And he said, well, I got other things to consider. I'll let you know. And I said, thank you. Thereafter, I follow up, calls, emails. And the lady at the time that was the liaison, which she's still in the office, she said, hey, kid, I don't know what to tell you. He's always traveling. He's not here. Call him at his cell phone. I gave him a call. He answered the phone. He said, I'm in a meeting. Call me back. I did call back. I'm in a meeting. I'll call you back. He did call back, and he said, how much I have to pay you, kid? No, I just want the opportunity. When can you start? I can start tomorrow. Come on Monday. I had to do 80 hours a month. I tripled the hours from Monday to Friday, from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. And I did everything, man. I work with boxes. I answer the phone. I answer emails. I picked up people at the airport. I took them to hotels. I paid for lunches. I put banners. I organized conventions. I work with T-shirts. I started, and I was already a licensed attorney, but I had no ego. I come from a working class family. I said, you know what? Maybe Paco's testing me, right? But my attitude was, every opportunity I get to meet someone, I would try to learn, ask a question about the industry. What are you? What is your purpose of your visit? What are you doing? What's going on with this situation? So I was like a sponge, absorbing information and networking. And then as time went by, Paco started delegating more responsibilities and obligations. And then he appointed me as the in-house legal counselor. And then I started working with legal documents, resolutions, purse bids, mandatories. I started also working with the rating system, going through the divisions. Then Paco started taking me traveling with him, meeting people, business meetings, then with meetings with the presidents of the organizations. And I was there with my mouth shut, but open ears. And after a meeting, I would consult with Paco. What happened here? What's this? What's the agreement? What's going to happen? And then more responsibilities. Paco would say, Gustavo, talk to Eddie Hearn, talk to Tom Brown, talk to Carl Moretti, call Georgie Warren, call Tutico Zavala, and Dimitri Salita. And that went on crescendo until I would say the last 2 years or so, I was running the WBO internally on a day-to-day basis, always in consultation with Paco, and he would make the big decisions, and he would have the final decision making in all the process.
So when did you start getting paid, and when did you have ambitions of being the president, or was that something that he just wanted for you, or was that the committee that voted
No,
you in?
No. What we did was, when I started as an intern and eventually I came on board of the WBO, I still had my legal practice. So I told Paco, I'll take the same salary you're offering me to be your in-house legal counselor, right? And I'll reduce my practice so I can learn more quicker about the business and travel with him, right? He said, okay, no problem. So my main goal was to learn as much as possible, the quickest, and eventually become an advisor for boxers. or a promotional outlet or work with a network or a TV company. I was not expecting, nor I had aspirations as to becoming the WBO president. This was very organic, and I would say the last year before Paco decided to step down, many people from the BO were telling me, "You're the next guy. You're doing a great job," and I was like, "Thank you, but I'm not interested," because I didn't want to have expectations and then hit rock bottom. Because remember, Paco was the president of the BO for almost 30 years, so it's not easy for a man of his stature to take a step back and recognize and say, "You know what? I think 30 years is enough. I'm gonna step down and give a chance to the new blood and try to, pass the baton for the new generation." And, he never told me directly until maybe 2 months before the convention. He sat me down and he said, "Gustavo, I made a decision. I'm going to take a step back. I've consulted this with the members. And they support you. They've seen you grow in the BO. You know how the operation works. You've been there. They've seen you conduct yourself, the way you operate, the way you maneuver yourself, the way you handle yourself with everyone in the business. I'm going to support you for your candidacy as president for the BO and also the committee." So when I was humbled, right, and shocked, and I said, "Well, if these are God's plans, man, and Paco wants to give me the support and the blessing, what can you do, man? It's a life-changing opportunity. Either I get on board on the train or it passes and never comes back." So I say, so let's take it. And when the convention came and the elections proceedings commenced, I was voted the president unanimously, man.
Now, you think you were voted unanimously because he gave you the blessing? Because it's just like, it sounds such a perfect story. How was there no internal hatred from someone, maybe a son of Paco who thought he was going to be president? Maybe
No,
someone else
because
in the company had those ambitions. Just asking.
no. That's a legitimate question. First of all, Paco in, doesn't involve his family whatsoever with the business. You won't see Paco in any photo or video. You can check on Google, YouTube, or social media with any family member whatsoever. He thinks the total opposite. He's against nepotism. That's his philosophy, right? So, and let me tell you, the elections of the WBO, the election process is open. Anybody can, and we make the announcement on our official website. Anybody can submit their petition and run for candidacy. It's an open election. Certainly, his support is a solid foundation. I cannot, I got to be objective in that regard. Certainly, his support was solidify my candidacy, but he has that right. Either he supports me or he doesn't support me. And if anybody would want to run at that time, they could do so. But certainly his support gave me a boost of my candidacy. But the other members of the executive committee, they were also on board because they had seen my development for the past almost 10 years.
No, absolutely, man. It sounds like a life-changing opportunity for you and your family. Congratulations. Before I get back to the people's question, I do have another one in the chamber. Being, an intern, then going through being the in-house attorney, ultimately being the president. Tell me that you've heard the phrase WBO stands for what Bob orders. And
Absolutely, man. Every
and
time.
what is your plans on trying to abolish that mindset for the fans, if any? Like, do you not care? Because fans are fans. They're always going to think something.
That's been a legitimate question and concern by the fans or the media. And I gotta be very truthful to you, man. I would have the same concerns as well if I was on the other side. But what I tell the fans is, you know what? come to the WBO office. We'll open the doors. We'll give you water and coffee. We'll open the files, and you see all the paperwork in black and white. We have a long-standing relationship with Bob Arum, and that doesn't mean that we're going to do what Arum tells me to do. I'm not a puppet. If I have to say no to Arum or Carl Moretti or Jeremy Cole, their attorney, I will say, you know what? We have a long-standing, excellent relationship, but I can't disregard the rules. And we did that recently for Janibek. When Shiraz was out, they asked for a mandatory Shane Mosley Jr. I said no. Through Janibek's manager, Egis Klimas, I said, Egis, I love you. I love the support of Usyk, Janibek, Lomachenko. All your fighters have fought for the WBO, but I cannot. The guy, Shane Mosley Jr., unfortunately, does not qualify to be the mandatory at this time. So I said no. And if you have, and I'll tell you, you guys have sponsors in your shows, right?
Yes.
Sponsors.
Yes.
If you guys have successful, honest business relationship with your partners, why would you change that formula? If it's honest, if it's transparent, and if it is successful, right? I tell the fans, you would say, well, what Bob orders, that's bullshit, man. We have a long-standing relationship with them, honorable relationship, professional and transparent. Come to the BO. We'll open our offices. We'll show you the files. We post everything on social media, in our official website. You started saying that I'm very active on Twitter as to the way we operate, and that's the way it has to be, to give the fans the truth and full transparency as to how we operate. I want to be the outlier sanctioning body in the business.
Can you give us, I guess, the short version of what happened with Albert Bell? Because obviously we seen, we seen Valdez get another title opportunity when it should have been, or at least we thought it should be, Albert Bell. Did he do something internally to get jumped over?
Yeah. Thanks for the question, because
That's a good question. That's because I've interviewed Albert Bell.
And I like Albert and his team. Albert is a nice young man. He came to the WBO. He was very supportive of the WBO, wanting to fight for the WBO. But man, you have to comply with the rules. You need to face rated opposition. Check his record. He hasn't fought a rated contender since he was installed in the ratings. And you would say, well, why Valdez got a title shot? You can't compare the records of Bell and Valdez. Regardless if Valdez was coming off a defeat, thereafter he defeated Liam Wilson, who fought for the title and had defeated rated opposition. Albert Bell, the reason he never fought for the title was that he had never fought rated opposition. If you check our rules, I believe it's section 8 of our World Championship rules and the ABC ratings criteria, you need to face rated opposition within a specific period of time since your installment in the ratings and defend your ratings position, right? Unfortunately, he got to number 1 by default. Sometimes you can get a fighter, let's say a fighter's rated number 4, right? And number 1 wins, let's say for a scenario, so the fans can understand. Albert is currently occupies the number 4 spot, right? Number 1 suddenly wins a world title, he's out. Then Albert moves by default 2-1, 3-2, and 4-3, right? And then number 1 and 2 fight for an eliminator, or number 1 loses and number 3 gets injured and is demoted, and then Albert Bell moves automatically to number 1. And you would say, well, he's been number 1 for 6 months. Yeah, so has he fought a rated contender? The answer is no. If he doesn't comply with the rules, I can't give him a shot. The same happened to Archie Sharp.
What about the counter that the Bell team would say that they can't get those, like they can't get a Valdez to say yes?
That's
They
what
couldn't
But
even get they couldn't even get
that's a
Archie Sharp to say yes, according to them.
Nelson, that may be true, but I don't. That those are the circumstances, unfortunately, of Albert Bell. If nobody wants to fight him, I can't order a rated contender to fight another rated contender unless it's for an elimination bout, right? And ordinarily, the WBO does not do elimination bouts like the IBF, which operates number one, number two for the eliminations, right? The WBO does not operate that way because if we would do an elimination bout, the winner would then be entitled to a property right. And then the winner could be waiting there 6 months, 8 months, 1 year for the mandatory. And that would freeze the division. So I rather, instead of doing an elimination bout, unless it is warranted, because we have to consider each scenario, the weight division, if there's a vacancy, if there are no big profile names in the division, and you want to do like a box tournament between 1 and 4, 2 and 3, or 2 and 3 and 1 and 4, depends. We have to consider each case on a case by case scenario. Unfortunately, with Albert Bell, he's had bad luck on finding suitable opposition. If nobody wants to fight him, what can I do, my man?
No, we
Either
just
he
wanted
has to
that
comply with
clarity.
the rules, you know?
Yeah. No. We wanted that clarity, and thank you for answering that. Looks like we have Ali and Dago. Gustavo, who are your top 3 favorite fighters of all time?
Man, I would say Trinidad.
I knew you were gonna say that.
Trinidad, that was my first ever boxing experience or boxing event was Trinidad against Hassan Sharifi. His first comeback fight after losing to Hopkins in Puerto Rico. Oh man, electrifying atmosphere.
Okay.
Tito is like Maradona is to Argentina, Pelé to Brazil. You know, he's an icon. So I would say Trinidad number 1. Another favorite fighter, Golovkin, man. I love Golovkin. Golovkin. And another fighter that I love, man, there's so much. Man. Let me see. I got to say somebody, on active because I got to be objective as the president. So let me see. One more. Man, favorite fighter. Trinidad, Golovkin.
Ivan Calderon. He's Puerto Rican.
No, tremendous fighter.
Wilfredo
Let me
Benitez.
see.
Wilfredo Benitez.
Alfredo Benitez, El Radal. Man, that's a tough one. Wilfredo Gomez.
Okay.
Wilfredo Gomez. Bazooka
Yeah.
Gomez.
Those
3, man. And Miguel Cotto, obviously.
Yeah.
Miguel Cotto, man.
Yeah, shout
Miguel.
out to Cotto.
There's so many. I like many of our champions, but remember, I got to be very prudent with my remarks. So I rather stay on the line,
For sure. I have Benitez Boxing that says, how can someone who is interested in the business get started working in a sanctioning body? Thank you.
That's a good question. I think there's no formula. There's no 2 + 2 4 to get involved in boxing. Boxing is more as to who you know, and somebody introduces you to somebody, and that somebody then refers you to another somebody, and that opens the door. In my case, I created my circumstances. I think it was a combination of pushing, hustling, and pure luck, man. I called, sent an email, follow up, and that was at least my circumstances. What I've seen as to other people coming to the business, either they enter through one particular position, maybe social media or logistics or fighter liaison, I don't know, and then they would move up the ladder or change positions, and then they would work for a company. Thereafter, they would change to another. It depends, but there's no formula, man.
All right. I got Treese in Ohio that says, what are your thoughts on the
Sorry, I have a little cold.
No worries. Treese in Ohio says, what are your thoughts on the WBC's Grand Prix, and will you offer something similar?
I think it's a good idea. Everything that Turkey's doing, I think it's we have to be open minded. He's doing very unique concepts or projects. I love the Riyadh season. Their shows, it's unbelievable. The production, the settings, the art, the trailers, the comic uh, concepts coming into play, making the big fights. Now the tournament with the BC. I wish Mauricio all the best. He's always striving to implement new ideas and changes. I may agree with some, I may disagree with others, but I have nothing but respect for Mauricio. He's also a colleague and a mentor as well, and supported my candidacy in conjunction with the other three presidents. And they went to Puerto Rico and supported me 100%. I've known them for quite some time now. I think it's a good idea. Every platform that provides an opportunity for new talent should be welcomed, man, because we all benefit directly or indirectly. There may be a fighter from WBC Grand Prix tournament that may not necessarily have an opportunity with the BC for a world title, but eventually can transition either to the IBF, WBA, WBO, and have a title shot. The same from our side. If I have a rated champion and the rated champion gets an opportunity to fight for another sanctioning body, would I be concerned or what would you say, disappointed? No, man. It's all for the fighters. I would say, champ, God bless you. You got to take it, you know? So I wish them all the best. As to whether we will do a tournament, that could certainly be a possibility, or maybe do a unified tournament with all the sanctioning bodies involved. That remains to be seen. But I have a great relationship with Mauricio and the other colleagues, and we don't disregard that opportunity to be considered in the future.
Gustavo, you spoke of one belt, and obviously you just now said how the other presidents for the other sanctioning bodies, supported you and your presidency. We also seen Saturday night a I guess a belt that was created with all the sanctioning bodies on it. So where I'm
Yeah.
heading is, do you see a future where the sanctioning bodies can be splitting this sanctioning fees and there's only one belt to represent the four of you? Or because it's all separate literal businesses, is that just never going to work?
That's a great question. Remember, guys, every sanctioning body has their respective rules, norms, policies. The WBC is based in Puerto Rico. They are governed by other separate rules, although they are regulated also by American rules. Laws and regulations, because they operate in America as well. The BA has its own policies as well, rules. Everyone has their own way of doing things, right? I think we are more in a trend of trying to work together and trying to uniform or standardize some things, unifications, mandatories, weight categories, working with the female side, maybe trying to do a anti-doping protocol that is uniform for all the four sanctioning bodies. As to a single belt, what Mauricio did on the Undisputed, he created a special belt where he incorporated the logos of the four sanctioning bodies internationally recognized, for the better be a Bivol. I don't, I have my reservations as to whether that is necessary or unnecessary. I respect what he does, and 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 if he wants to promote that practice, I think he's done it in the past. I have no objections, because that's the way he operates, and I have to respect that. But I can certainly have my reservations. I think our titles, including the BC, the IBF, the WBA, the WBO, the IBO, every title has its own credibility, legitimacy, and respect. I think if you try to create another title, you could undermine the credibility of your own title. certainly you can make a special title for a special event, which is what Mauricio did, right? And I can respect that because he wants to maybe showcase the title as a special distinction, right? And I could agree on that basis. I think, but it's a it's a tricky situation. At least that's my perspective. And please don't misinterpret. I respect what he does, and that is his policy, and he incorporates us in the belt, which I'm thankful for. We would do the same thing if we would do that. As to WBO, if there's a special championship bout that deserves a special title, I would do it in a different way. At least that's my perspective.
All right. We got Octo with a friendly one that says, "What's your favorite music artist? And give us one movie we should watch."
My favorite music artist. I'm a musician, so I love different types of music, but I like Dr. Dre, man, and Snoop,
Okay.
and
Okay.
and obviously Tupac.
All right.
All right.
Yeah, yeah. But I like salsa. I'm a musician.
Are you a salsero? Can you dance salsa?
Not so much, but I can play timbales, conga, bongo, campana. I'm a huge salsa fan, and I play percussion instruments, and drums as well. I like a little bit of everything:
So I'm glad.
jazz, salsa, R&B, hip hop, rock and roll.
So I'm glad I'm not the only Puerto Rican that can dance salsa.
Oh, you're Puerto Rican?
I am Puerto Rican. My
Oh,
family.
my man, Boricua. Where are you from? Puerto Rico? Where exactly?
Caguas. My family's from Caguas.
Wow. Okay, man. Okay, I'm from Mayagüez, the
Oh,
southwest.
yeah. I'm familiar with that.
My man, I didn't know, my man. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Boricua en la casa.
Ya tú sabes.
Está
That's
bien.
cool,
I
man.
mean, I'm Dominican. I guess I'm on the outside here. You guys having that Puerto
You're
Rican
out
love.
of this conversation.
We're brothers. We're brothers, man. Dominicano and Puerto Riqueño, we're brothers, man.
Exacto, exacto. Oye, Gustavo, so there has been some rumors circulating that Turkey wanted to buy the sanctioning bodies via acquisition. Is that even possible because they're non-profit? Can you be bought if he wanted to?
No, that is not true. That is not true.
Okay.
Turkey has not. I've met with him a couple of times. He has never made an offer or made any assertions or comments or remarks of that nature. He wanted to do a sponsorship agreement, right? Whereby he would offer a compensation to the sanctioning bodies in exchange for promoting the Riyadh season. What the WBO did was we respectfully declined because remember, Turkey, he is a form of de facto promoter. I would say that we're based in the U.S., although we're based in Puerto Rico is a U.S. territory. So we're governed by federal laws and state laws, and we are a nonprofit entity, and we should not receive any monies or compensations directly or indirectly on behalf of a promoter, only those limited to the sanction fees, right, which the promoter deducts from the purses of the fighter, right? And we have to disclose those fees per the Ali Act disclosure provisions containing the act. So what we did to Turkey is to promote the Riyadh season and support you. We don't need any compensation or monies. To the opposite, we are financially sustainable. We are financially responsible. You can check all our paperwork and financials in the Federal Trade Commission website, which we report those documents on a yearly basis. Also with our rules, financial reports, salaries, etc. What we will do, Turkey, is accommodate your needs per our rules, right? To the extent my rules allow me to do so, to help you do those big fights. So we don't need any compensation or any other type of monies or gifts or any of that nature. We will help you without nothing in exchange, just for the best of boxing. But that is untrue about making offers to buying the sanctioning body. No, at least I've been there with him. No remarks whatsoever.
But to be clear, is it possible for a nonprofit to be bought? Can he buy you guys if he put the offer? Like, I mean, because again, you're non-for-profit, so I just want to make sure legally is it something that he can do if he wanted to?
I believe no. I believe no. No.
Right. All right. Moving on, and remember to tell me when you're pressed for time here. I got
Let me get a. Give me 1 second to get a little bit of water.
No
okay?
worries, no worries. Ladies and gentlemen, we are joined by the WBO president, Gustavo Olivieri. It is a first come, first served basis with your questions. Saint, I'm going to yours. I hope he knows what you're talking about. Don't make me read this long question and he doesn't know what you're talking about. All right, Gustavo. So the next one is coming from Saint I Am. He says, with boxing expanding globally, especially in places like Saudi Arabia, do you think tournaments such as the quote unquote Kings of the Ring concept I spoke of could help grow the sport internationally while giving fans and fighters more clarity on who is the best in each division? I'm not sure if this gentleman maybe contacted you on this previous conversation, but he basically is making it seem like you guys spoke about a tournament, the King of the Ring concept that he's trying to put out.
No. I don't recall a tournament or concept called King of the Ring. But
what are your thoughts on tournaments?
If you check on BoxRec, there are boxing events on a weekly basis everywhere, man. So I think the question is, what would be the ideal scenario or platforms whereby fighters would showcase their skills before the world? And Riyadh season is right now the global destination for boxing, but it depends on the fighters and the dancing partners. You always need a dancing partner for that big fight to be showcased before everyone. Unfortunately, like Shakur was fighting Schofield. Schofield pulled out due to a medical situation. Came in Josh Padley, not a big name. Unfortunately, Shakur he looked great, but he still needs a dancing partner to have that definitively showcase,
For sure. Next one is from Call Me MPO, G from Brooklyn. What's your thoughts on Crawford Canelo?
I love it, man. I saw Bud in Riyadh and I saw him in New York a couple of weeks ago. He looks strong as a bull, confident. You can't disregard Crawford, man. He's a special talent. And when he's challenged or people say, man, you don't have a chance, that's when he gets his fire. And Crawford is a unique talent. And remember, he used to be a wrestler. So physically, he's strong as a bull, can fight righty or southpaw, has a nice jab, smart, adapts through the rounds. You have to favor Canelo on paper, right? The bookies will favor Canelo without a question, but you can't disregard Crawford. Crawford is a generational talent, and when he's challenged, that's when he performs to the highest of his abilities. I can't predict an outcome. It will be irresponsible. I cannot take any sides. Canelo is, the top dog in the division. And the WBO will sanction that fight. And next week, probably, we'll have more news as to the conditions of that sanction, right? And people would say, well, Crawford jumping to weight classes. Should he be rated at 168 when he hasn't fought in 168? Well, you have Crawford, 4-division world champion, 35, 40, 47, 54. Undefeated. Unified, undisputed champion, 2 weight classes. The record of his opposition, the level of activity, considered boxing's pound for pound king. Would you rate him at 168?
I would not rate him at 168. I think he's being selective.
That remains to be seen. That's a decision to be determined by the committee. But consider the other fighters in that weight division: Pacheco, Munguia, Surase, and Billy. Will Crawford have a chance against them?
I don't know, man.
Yeah,
And
I haven't
Billy,
thought
that's what
about
I'm
that.
saying. And this is the problem that I have with this fight, Gustavo. I want to see those fights. Before Munguia got knocked out, I was campaigning last year for him to fight Munguia. Fight David Benavidez. I came this close. I was so happy the Turkey offered him the 64-pound catch weight, and Benavidez couldn't make it. But fight Berlanga. People like to say Berlanga's quote-unquote bum langa. But vamos a ver. Vamos a ver.
Who's fighting? Who?
No,
Fighting Berlanga who?
I'm saying Crawford. He needs to show us he belongs at 68. Like, getting a shot at Canelo is wild. It's
such
just
a wild
wild.
card,
It's
right.
just, and then the justification is, well, it's Canelo's body type. Because if you say, well, fight David. Well, David's too big, but you want to fight Canelo. Yeah, but it's his body type. He's really not that big. Except he was willing to go to 200 pounds to fight Makabu, according to Eddie Reynoso in the WBC convention. I mean, except he moved up and one punch knocked out Sergey the Crusher Kovalev. He lasted 12 with Bivol, who just... Bivol's the only man in history, I don't know, again, as a lawyer and being in the WO, do you know anyone that beat two active, current, defending, undisputed champions? Crawford's never even defended. He's never defended an undisputed. Canelo's on his third defense. Bivol, obviously, Better Beef was defending. And, when Bivol beat Canelo, he was also defending. I just think it's different. I would love to see him fight anyone at 68 with a pulse. Anyone.
Remember Nelson.
Nestor.
Nestor, right? Nestor. Sorry.
No
Nestor,
worries.
my Dominican brother. Remember, we should analyze each case on a case-by-case basis, right? You have Turkey wants to do Canelo Crawford. Crawford wants to fight Canelo. Canelo wants to fight Crawford. Crawford has 37 years of age. He wants that challenge. He wants that big name. Canelo, on the opposite, wants that huge payday. There's some fans in some media like yourself that may have some reservations as to, he should fight somebody first at 168. But again, those are dealings that the parties have voluntarily agreed to. There's so much that we can do, but at the same time, many fans want to see the fight. People want to see Benavidez Canelo instead of Crawford Canelo, right? But that has not happened. Benavidez was the WBC 168 mandatory. The question was, why wasn't the mandatory enforced?
Which is why I asked my first question.
You gotta ask Team Benavidez and his promoter Samson, why wasn't the mandatory at 168 forced?
Well, they chose to go up and wait. They believe
no. That's another thing, brother. Ask the question. Call his promoter and ask him, why didn't they enforce the mandatory 168?
The question I've always gotten is the answer I've always gotten is that Canelo does what he wants. You can't force Canelo to fight you.
No. But ask. That's untrue. Ask his team why, when he was 168, they didn't enforce the mandatory. That's homework for you, brother.
Well,
okay,
I was on the ratings meeting with Mauricio, and he did state that even if they wouldn't give Canelo a date, like they would, like if they enforce it, there wasn't a said date, so Benavidez would have just been in limbo.
Let me clarify that so you can get a perspective. When you force the mandatory, you order what is called a negotiation letter. You notify both parties, the champion and the challenger, dear teams, fighter A, fighter B, you have 30 days to start negotiating for the mandatory. If during those 30 days the parties are unable to reach an agreement, we will order purse bids, right, for the promotional rights of that particular contest, right? Let's say a promoter X wins the purse bid. That promoter has to conduct that fight within a particular amount of time. Per the BO is within 45 to 90 days after the purse bid is adjudicated to do the fight. If that mandatory or that fight does not take place, there are certain consequences, either against the champion or the promoter. It depends. But when you're the interim champion or the mandatory, you have to enforce your position, because the mere fact that a champion doesn't have a TV date or a fight date, that is not a sufficient reason to not enforce it, at least from the WBO.
I'm
We've
with
had
you, man.
champions, for example, let's say we have a champion that has not fought in a year. Oh, I don't have a promoter. I don't have a TV network. Well, I'm sorry, but there are other fighters waiting in line. You have to defend the title. If you can't defend the title, unfortunately, we have to strip you. We did that with Amanda Serrano when she was starting. Paco did that to Amanda Serrano. She had no promoter at the time. And we said, well, we have to follow the rules. You need to defend the title within an X amount of days. And the WBO stripped Amanda. You can ask his trainer, Yola Maldonado, and her manager. When she was starting, she didn't have a promotional outlet, and she needed to defend the belt. She didn't defend the belt, so she got stripped. So when you have a mandatory and you or an interim champion and you don't enforce the mandatory, that's on you, man.
Hey, man, I know you just made a lot of people upset because they love to say that Canelo avoided David and David was avoided, and I never understood it. I thought, him moving up was the issue.
No,
But
no, 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 no. I don't think so. I don't know the internal circumstances of the BC, but you have to ask his team as to why they didn't enforce the mandatory. Because if
because
you're the interim champion and he's been fighting, Benavides is a hell of a fighter. I'm a fan of his. He's one of the best, and I would like to see Canelo and Benavides as well. And I know you guys as well. But if his team or his promoter doesn't enforce the mandatory, that's a question that you have to raise to his team as to why his mandatory, when he was the mandatory 168, was not enforced.
yeah, man, favoritism. I wanna say they didn't want to ruffle Canelo's feathers. Everybody knows that Canelo had a 3-fight deal with the PBC, and if Al tries to enforce the Mexican monster on Canelo, I think that there's not going to be a happy relationship. That's what everyone assumes, and all we can do is assume. But I do got more. If you still have time, I want to keep checking.
Yeah, sure, sure,
All right,
sure.
we got Chad in Canada. He says that the WBO acknowledge an interim champion as the top mandatory challenger. And I think he's talking about the rotation, which you spoke of on Twitter, maybe? You spoke of the rotation for the mandatories for Bivol?
Okay. If we have an interim champion, that interim champion is the mandatory for the full champion. If there's no interim champion, the highest rated available contender in the ratings that qualifies with the rules for mandatory challenger designation and is designated as such will be the mandatory for the full champion.
All right. And the next one is from Mr. Benny Hinn. It says, what new rules will the WBO be implementing to elevate the sport?
That's a good question. The first thing I'm trying to do now is updating the rules and see which rules need to be either modified or changed to further enhance our organization and also adapt to the times. Because we either we adapt to the times and the new trends, or we become obsolete or irrelevant, or our rulings have no common sense. But we also have discretion and flexibility in our rules. That's why when we issue a ruling, you're always going to see, when we issue a ruling, you will always going to see that the WBO reserves its right to issue any further rulings that would serve the best interest of boxing.
All right, we got Talk Trends. He says, "Will you have high rehydration clauses like the IBF? Is that something you guys
No,
are okay?"
no, because we believe that the weight the weight limits, weight checks, the medical procedures, anti-doping protocols, all those what's the wording? All those what will be the wording? All those circumstances should be solely and exclusively governed by the local host commission. We don't have the expertise as to anti-doping procedures. We don't have the jurisdictions to regulate the weight proceedings or weigh-ins conducted by the local commission. I think those are issues that should be solely governed by the local commission that regulates the event itself and the fights.
Tip Bellis that says, "Why not allow Keith Thurman, who has fought at 54, unlike Earl Spence, against the former champion Carlos Quintana back in 2012, to contest against Tim Tszyu for the WBO title?" I guess this is when you didn't allow it to happen.
When we didn't sanction Thurman because he was inactive, and he hadn't fought in 154. Excuse me, and that's why we didn't sanction Tim Tszyu against Thurman.
All right, we got Jurade that says, "How you doing, President? Since Bud is moving up to fight Canelo at 68, will he retain his WBO interim status at 54?
You shall hear more about remains to be seen. Next week, we will officially report to that question.
Major Media says, "Does the WBO have any weight rules clauses for their fights, or what are some rules specifically set for WBO championship bouts?"
As it pertains to weight, our rules simply govern as to the prescribed weight. For example, if you're welterweight, the weight limit is 147. If you exceed that weight, you have 2 hours per our rules since the official weigh-in to comply with that weight, right? But that depends on the local commission. Some commissions may give you 1 hour. Other commissions may not give you time to make the prescribed weight. It depends on the jurisdictions where the fight is being contested and their own rules. Remember, the WBO has limited jurisdiction. Each commission, at least in America, and the Indian reservations and the territories are sovereign. And as sovereign jurisdictions, they have their own rules and regulations, and they enforce them accordingly. And the other question was, as to our rules, what was the other question?
What rules specifically are set for WBO championship bouts, and do you have any weight rules or clauses for title fights?
No. I answered the question as to the weight, as to rules for championship bouts. We have numerous rules. I could at least state a basic rule: when a champion wins a title, he normally has no more than 9 months to make it mandatory, except in the heavyweight division, that the committee may grant you a period no greater than 1 year to make the defense against mandatory.
Why is it different for the heavyweights?
Because the heavyweights, it's a particular division, and it has its own circumstances that the committee, when they adopted the rules, they provided a more broader term to make a defense against the mandatory. That's a good question. I haven't checked the history as to why the distinction. I'll make that homework.
Appreciate that.
All right.
That's weird.
Yeah.
Saint actually rewrote the question. He says, "Saint from the community, hello, and thank you for sharing your time with us, Mr. Olivieri. We've seen great champions crowned through traditional title fights, but Many fans and fighters believe boxing lacks structured tournament format to definitively establish the best in the division. I've developed the quote-unquote king of the ring concept, an international tournament designed to bring clarity by having top contenders compete in a structured format leading to an undisputed champion. Would the WBO ever consider sanctioning or recognizing a tournament-based structure like this to help determine mandatory challengers or create new pathways to title? I'd love to send more details. Where's the best place to reach you at? So I guess a DM?
Tell him there's an email, info as an information, infonews@wboboxing.com. He can send an email there or a proposal or any Q&A, any inquiries, and we'll gladly respond them. The WBO would support any tournament that would, be for the betterment of the boxers and the industry. That's not a problem. The question is whether the tournament structure, considering that this is a one-man sport, individual sport, this is not a team sport, and you have conflict of interest involved in the sport. Promoters representing specific fighters, promoters aligned with specific networks, competitors, which that creates a problem because everyone wants a little piece of the pie, and you have competition. This is not a monopoly or a league structure, only one umbrella. Theoretically, that would be the ideal scenario, but I don't think it's practical because all those particular circumstances that I've mentioned previously during the program. So, but if there's a tournament that we see benefits boxing and the WBO believes that it would warrant support, 100%. Like the World Boxing Super Series, that was a very cool concept. And the cruiserweights, bantamweights, and super middle, right? You also have to consider those weight divisions where there's not a big enough name whereby those small promoters can get together and do a tournament. But when you have the heavyweights, lightweights, welterweights, divisions that you have top tier elite fighters and they have their respective promotional outlets and networks, that's a little bit more challenging. Remember, now you're seeing the promoters working together in the Riyadh season because what does the Cuba Gooding Jr. says in the movie Jerry Maguire?
Show me the money.
Money talks, my man.
Gustavo, you got a tough one here from an educated boxing fan. His name is Alex Vega from Palm Beach, South Florida. How and why boxers get ranked seem like an ever-evolving mystery to almost all of us fans, and I'm sure a lot of boxers as well. How is Abdullah Mason, who has never fought in a scheduled 10-rounder, get to be ranked number 13 under the WBO when under the last president of the WBO, it took Keyshawn Davis to defeat former title challenger Anthony Yiggett in his first 10-rounder to get ranked? We have Cordell Booker ranked number 5 fighting the junior middleweight WBO title champion when he hasn't fought within the 154-pound limit in his last 3 fights. If you cannot or will not give an answer, or may I contact to help find these answers to help inform our great fellow boxing fans?
Okay, let's go. What was the first question as to Abdullah Mason? Why is he rated?
How is he ranked number 13 when he's never had a 10-round fight?
Easy. To be rated per the ABC ratings criteria, at least to get rated in the top 15, you need at least 2 bouts scheduled for 10 rounds or at least 4 scheduled for 8 rounds. If you check his record, he's had 4, I believe more than 4 bouts.
Yeah, he's had like 7 8-rounders.
So technically, per the ABC ratings criteria, he complies to be rated. That's for starters. So that's his first. That's his first question was duly responded. What's the second one?
The second one was about Cordell Booker being ranked number 5, having not fought in 54 in the last 3 of his last 3 fights.
Has he ever fought in 154? I'm not sure. Has he ever fought in 154?
Cordell, yes.
Well, if he's fought in 154 and his last 3 bouts, let me get him right here.
His last 3 should have been at 60.
Let me see. Let me get. I'm checking the box right real quick. Okay, his last 1, 2, 3, 4. He's his last fight was at 160.5. Before that, 155, 159, 153. So he's fought either above 154 or below 154. So he can fight at 154. What's the problem with that?
I don't know. That's his question.
He's got bout scheduled for 10. Look, 1, 2, 3, so more than 4 fights. More than 4 fights scheduled for 10. More than 4 fights scheduled for 8. So technically, he can qualify to be installed at the ratings. And you can argue, oh well, why he's number 5? Well, that's a question for the ratings committee. And Fundora is doing a voluntary, so he can fight whoever fighter he wants, rated in the top 15. But technically, per the ratings criteria, he's qualified to be at 154. He's got more than 2 fights scheduled for 10 rounds, and he's got more than 4 fights scheduled for 8 rounds. And he has fought over the 154 limit as well, below the 154 limit. So he can fight at 150. He could be rated at 154. So what is third question?
No, that was it. It was just 2. The third was just if you couldn't answer, how could he contact you to get a private answer? But you answered.
I hope that satisfies his questions. I try my best.
This next guy is no question. He's just saying Sebastian and his team do not intend to. Well, it is a question. It's just he says they do not intend to fight anyone good. What can be done about stripping him or getting him to fight someone good like a Charles Conwell?
No, the first thing when the fans need to understand this in the media, when fighters either get rated or win a title, they are entitled to what it's called property rights. In other words, they need to be guaranteed a due process. So I cannot strip a champion unless that champion's contravenes or fails to comply with a specific rule. Fundora has complied with all the WBO rules. The question is, he has to satisfy his mandatory challenger, his mandatory title defense obligation. That once he fights Booker, he has to discharge that obligation against the mandatory challenger, which most likely be Xander Zayas, because Crawford is fighting Canelo. So probably Crawford is not coming back to 154, and most likely Crawford either will relinquish the 154 title, and therefore that paves the way to give Xander Zayas the shot at the title against Fundora, and Zayas become the mandatory. That most likely will be the scenario in the next coming weeks.
That's what I'm talking about.
All right, so we only got a few more. We'll get you out of here. It looks like 3 more. Next one is coming from James Benitez in Atlanta. He says, so is Charlie Suarez ranked number 1 by default? Bud getting a WBO interim at 154? Blatant favoritism. This got to stop, respectfully. And you literally are saying Crawford better than bigger guys at higher weight deserve, and saying he don't have to prove himself, but almost lost to Madrimov. So not really a question. I guess the Charlie Suarez is a question.
It's a tough crowd.
No, but Nestor, and guys, I like that, man. Criticize. We got to be. How do you call that? Scrutinize the sanctioning bodies. I love it. We may agree or disagree, but we got to be accountability. We got to be accountable to you guys, the fans, the stakeholders in boxing. So his first question was, can you repeat the first question?
Was Charlie Suarez ranked number 1 by default?
I believe Charlie Suarez defeated a rated contender. He's not the mandatory 130 because the mandatory was Oscar Valdez when he was the interim champion. When Navarrete moved up to 135 against Barachev for the vacant, he returned to 130. He fought Valdez, terminated the interim championship. So Charlie Suarez number 1, but not the mandatory. And I believe he occupied number 1 because he defeated a rated contender. I'll tell you now. Charlie Suarez. He defeated, I believe, Jorge Castañeda, who was rated. I got to check that one, but he's not the mandatory. What's the next question?
The other part of that was Bud and the WBO And
Okay,
you're showing
but
clear
for the 150
favoritism.
for the 154, Bud was 147 undisputed. He moved to 154, and Fundora at the time was injured and suspended by the Nevada State Athletic Commission after the Zoo fight. Remember his
We
nose
do.
or something?
Yep,
He
the
was
nose.
suspended due to the injury and was unavailable to fight. So what we did was we did an interim, and Crawford's team requested to be sanctioned that fight for the interim title. And we sanctioned that fight because the champion was inactive due to an injury. And Crawford fight for the interim title. What's wrong with that? That's the purpose. That should be the legitimate purpose of an interim champion when a full champion suffers an injury whereby he's unavailable to defend. So it's not favoritism. It's boxing 101 interim championship. What's the next question?
The next one is the fact that you're literally saying that Crawford is better than the bigger guys at 68.
I got it. The Crawford Canelo thing. No. I just put it out to you guys. I haven't said anything. I haven't determined anything, nor I have conveyed to the committee how to act or move this way or that way. No. I just put it out for discussion.
But he is getting approved, Gustavo, because you guys don't have another, like, Crawford is your champion. Who else can you think off top that's fought for that many different versions of the WBO? He's literally the definition of what the WBO calls the super champion, right?
Yeah, he is. He is. But remember, Nestor, the fighter voluntarily agrees to which title he wants to fight for. You don't press a fighter, fight for this title. The fighter is presented with an offer and an opportunity by his promotional outlet, his advisor, manager, team, etc. And the fighter determines which route he wants to pursue. If Crawford wants to fight for the WBO since his career, wants to retire as WBO champion, he's always welcome, but that's a decision solely on the fighter. If Crawford feels that he's WBO to the core and to the bone, amen to that. But we don't put a gun on his, to push him to determine which title he wants to pursue. He feels good becoming a WBO champion. He gets the respect, the recognition, the credibility, the legitimacy, the love. So that's a decision on Crawford, and the doors are always open for Crawford and his team.
Last two, I promise. And thank you so much for giving us so much time. The last one
Pleasure,
is
my man.
one of the last two. It says, "Who is the?" You don't have to answer this. Who is the most annoying promoter to deal with?
There's something in law called attorney-client privilege. I cannot disclose that information. But remember, this is a business, man. You can't take it personally, because you remember when Don King and Bob Arum, they were competitors, and allegedly they had their thing. But Bob and King were so smart. They said, if this is a good business for both of us, we'll make the business. And the same with the BO. I can have disagreements with promoters, managers, or some fighters, but I have to be objective, and I have to think of the long run for the future of the organization, for the betterment of boxers. And at the same time, if I have an issue with a promoter or a manager or an advisor, but I think the fighter really deserves a shot, has complied with everything, it's not the fighter's fault, I'll give him a chance, man. I can't take it personally. I have to think for the fighters and for the industry. But I'll reserve that response.
Great answer. That's a great answer.
I'm sliding one in for myself here, just because.
Yeah.
I don't know. You said you're a hustler, and I feel like I am, and this is something I would have done. Did you reach out to Espinoza he was a lawyer with Golden Boy before he became this Showtime executive? I mean, I want to believe Steven Espinoza is Latin with a name like Espinoza. Did you ever reach out for advice as a attorney getting into the boxing, or no?
No, I never had. I didn't know who to reach at that time. I had no involvement in the business whatsoever. I didn't know nobody from the business. I remember excuse me. And I think Espinosa is a very smart guy. And I've seen him. I've said hello. I haven't had the chance to personally introduce myself, and I would like to do so. And also, pull out some information as to his experience and knowledge of the sport, because he's been a lawyer, from a promoter. He's represented fighters. He's represented streaming networks. So the guy, he's got some stripes in the business, and I respect that. So, but I didn't have nobody that could at least guide me through the proper channels. The only guy that ever gave me some sort of advice was a guy called Adrian Clark. Have you heard of him?
Hell yeah, man. He just sponsored my event for Saturday. Shout out to Adrian Clark. That's amazing.
AC is my guy. I remember I read a report on him, or an article on Forbes magazine, and I wrote an email to the guy out of the blue, and he responded. And then we started exchanging texts. And he was one of the first guys that told me, Gustavo, keep your mouth shut. Just pull your ears and try to hear everyone, and try to keep learning and evolving. When you have doubts, ask questions, be humble, grounded, and you'll learn. And I keep in touch every now and then. And he has a champion now. Brian Norman is his champion, 147. AC is my guy, man. Very, humble guy. He was the first guy that ever gave me some sort of advice in the business, and I really appreciate it. And I'm going in May to see Brian Norman, and hopefully I get to speak with him and invite him to lunch. AC is a real OG. I like him, man. Real nice guy.
It's crazy that you say that, man. Because I'm older than AC, and obviously today I found out I'm older than you. But I look up to Adrian Clark. I can't believe how much he's done in this sport so young, and to hear this little story, it's just great. Shout out to Adrian and yourself. The
AC,
last,
man. That's my guy. AC is my guy.
yeah, for sure. The last question is from Huang out of Houston. He says, do you
Yeah.
think Turkey and Riyadh season are a good counter to promotional companies who seek to collect the belts of different sanctioning bodies so that only their fighters have a chance at winning those titles?
Man, that's a good question. Remember that since this is an individual sport, and each promoter has its own agenda in the sense of the way they do their business and with who they do their business. So I can't judge if a promoter wants to have his fighters fight in-house. And the house always wins, right? I'll put my fighters amongst themselves, or I'll do business with this sanctioning body, or this streaming network, or this sponsor. That's a prerogative of the promoter, or even the fighters or their teams, of how they want to do business. As to Turkey trying to get everyone involved, trying to put everyone, the best fighting the best, I'm all for it, man. I love the concept of the Riyadh season. He's doing things differently, unique, paying the fighters very well. So it's a win-win for everyone, and wants to get involved with the sanctioning bodies as well, supporting them, the promoters, having everyone on their similar platform, the Zone, Top Rank, Queensberry, through their, now they were with TNT, and now they're moving to the Zone. So that's a good question, but as long as the fighters are getting opportunities, getting paid well, keeping active, exposing their profiles, marketability, receiving endorsements, opportunities, I think it's a no-brainer. It's a win-win.
The last one snuck in by Jonathan Sims says, what's the benefit of one belt? And from that benefit, how can the sanctioning bodies be better as five acting as one? I think you kind of already answered that, right? That you all have different rules and policies.
That is very difficult, man, because everyone wants to have some sort of control, right? You have different perspectives, different mindsets, the way each one of us operates or thinks. For me, I could say Nestor deserves to be at the number one spot, whereby another colleague could say, no, he should be at number 3. the other colleague would say, well, he shouldn't be rated. He hasn't fought for our title and minor titles, or has not been en route through our development program. So it's very tough, man, to have only one title. Again, supply and demand, the opportunities. Everyone wants to have some sort of control. The egos. It's very tough, man. I don't see it. One title, I don't see it. We can have uniformity on some scenarios or circumstances, but everyone has their way to do things, their respective rules, the way they operate, and you have to respect that at the same time.
That is the last one, Gustavo, but I do want to slide in another one here. You have at least a dozen people that keep saying, ask if you're hiring or how to get involved with the WBO.
That was going to be my question, Ness. Are you hiring?
There you go. Everybody wants to work for the WBO after this interview.
We currently don't have vacancies, man. But what I'm trying to do is trying to make some changes and trying to incorporate young guys, professionals, so we can have a more fresher approach and perspective. I have to do that slowly because we also have lots of members that are veterans, knowledgeable, competent, with experience, standing, which I have to respect and defer to, right? You have to earn your stripes slowly but firmly, right? And I have to respect those that were before me, that they have been my mentors and still are. But, you know, it's a slow process, but eventually, if there are any vacancies for social media, all that sort of stuff, some internal personnel, legal work or something, we will announce it and publish it in our social media.
Gustavo, thank you so much. If you want to give out your social media in case anybody isn't following you, please do so.
Yeah,
and once again, thank you for all the time.
I'm active on Twitter. I'm active on Twitter under Olivieri, which is my last name, Olivieri Law, Olivieri Law.
All right, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you once again.
Amazing. Thank you.
My pleasure, man. Always a pleasure. Nestor, you text me whenever you want to do a chat. Let me know.
I'd love to get you on my show. I have a show as well. I have a show as well. I'd love to get you on.
Okay, my man. Let's set it up. Text me. Nestor will give you my phone number. Text me directly. We'll set it up. My brother Boricua.
Thank you, Gustavo. Pase buena.
Okay, my man. Have a good night, guys. Thanks for having me. Take care. Bye-bye.
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen, Gustavo Olivieri. And, special shout out to him because he's on Eastern time.